Right. Let's now talk to Dominic Sandbrook, historian, host of the Rest is History podcast, because there's a very interesting subject that we want to talk about, which is what is actually going on around these islands of ours, and is tourism, too much tourism, taking its toll? Let's find out. Dominic, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. I mean, there's an awful lot of people looking east at the moment and going, oh, God, it's really hot in Europe, so maybe we should just go on holiday here in Britain. But then you get the double whammy of reading the front page of the Metro today, who said there's a beach crisis in Britain because nobody's going on it because it's too cold. I mean, I wish people would stop being quite so kind of, you know, doom and gloomy about the state of the travel business. But you've got different news for us on the travel business in this country, haven't you?
Yeah, that people don't tend to visit the places in their own locality. So this is a survey done by the financial services company Wise.
Right.
And they've found that only 22% of us feel well-informed about when we're going sightseeing. Huge proportions of people haven't visited the local castles and museums in the local county.
Right.
And yet 36% of people have visited the Eiffel Tower. So in other words, familiarity breeding contempt, Mike. That's what it's all about.
Yes.
So in other words, have you been to all the places near where you live? The answer is probably no, and that's true of all of us.
Yeah.
But when we go abroad, we feel sort of honour bound to go with a little checklist and tick off.
I mean, it's a bit like I lived in New York for 10 years when I was a bit younger, and I would only really go to the touristy bits of it when somebody was visiting. And I think,
right, exactly.
I mean, London's a bit like that for me as well, because, I mean, there was a time when I would go to, you know, wander around a gallery of an afternoon, but you know, it's hard to find the time these days. I mean, I do look at an awful lot of it, because when you live in a place like London, you're seeing a lot of the history. I mean, literally, I'm looking out the window of my studio and I can see the Tower of London, see it every day, which is amazing. I haven't been in it for a while.
There you go.
But I've taken my kids to all of these places. But, you know, once they get a bit older, you know what that's like. You kind of go, do you fancy going to the Tower of London? Ugh. You know, I'd rather go to a pub. But I mean, pubs are also fun to do. I mean, there's pub crawls that you can do, which are quite historic, right?
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can basically, if you're interested in history, as so many people are, and why not? Because it's the fascinating stories, great characters, and so on. You can kind of, you know, we did a thing with our podcast, The Rest is History, where we went to Amsterdam and to Paris.
Right.
And Tom, my co-presenter, and I, we picked time periods. So he picked the golden age of the Netherlands. So that's the kind of the great townhouses of Amsterdam, Rembrandt, the art and all that stuff, when the Dutch were kind of ruling the roost. And in Paris, we did 60s Paris, so 1968, kind of kids throwing cobblestones at the police and all this. And we basically devised walking tours. So you can go on this kind of tour. We do it in the podcast. You go to nice bars, you go to cafes along the way, you have a nice lunch, but you also see some of the history, and you kind of immerse yourselves in a kind of a time and a place, I think. And that kind of escapism, I think that's a key part. It's always been a key part of where we go on holiday, because, I mean, I'm sure it's the same for you, Mike, as it is for me and for everybody else. You want to escape your daily grind, put it all behind you, and almost pretend that you're somebody else for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of it.
Are there sort of landmarks that people don't know about, do you think, in this country, where you know, people would be surprised that they're there, but they're actually not really visited much?
I think actually we take the beauties of our countryside for granted, the fantastic villages of so much of England, and not just, you know, the Cotswolds and the most touristy places, but if you go up north, Northumberland or somewhere, you know, fantastic coastline, beautiful castles, wonderful sights.
I remember discovering Bamborough Castle many years ago when my kids, which is unbelievable. You know, I mean, it's almost, I mean, also the thing that's great about it is that they've actually kind of made it a living castle, in the sense that they've got, you know, they've got figures, they've got, you know, they've still got furniture there. I know some purists will say, oh yeah, but that's a bit sort of schmaltzed up, but I actually quite liked it. You know, you went in the basement, there were people being executed. You know, it was great.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think we tend to be a bit sniffy about going on holiday we're still sniffy about going on holiday in England. But actually, it's often so much more relaxing than going abroad, and just, you know, you're basically, when you're in the punishing heat, standing in a great queue surrounded by mobs of people. I mean, you know, that's never going to happen to you in Bamborough, is it? I mean,
it really isn't.
You might freeze to death, but I mean, you're not going to get sunstroke.
But there are fewer, better beach scenes that you can look out over Holy Island and all of that. I mean, it really is beautiful up there. And Scotland. I mean, I lived in Scotland for many years, and because it's so accessible, there's not traffic to deal with. You can, if you get to Glasgow and rent a car, I mean, you can be in the Highlands to you in a couple of hours. And it's incredible. It's stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the downside is you go somewhere like Cornwall in the summer and, you know, you're queuing for hours to get onto the beach, to get into the car park.
Right.
So I think, I mean, it sounds a sort of, it's kind of common sense, really, but a good tip, we were trying to come up with tips for people when they travel abroad. Obviously, don't necessarily go to the headline places. Go to the kind of place that's next to it. You know, don't go to the place where there's going to be a mob of 300 people waiting to get in. Actually, you'll find in the next square along, there's a beautiful church or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, of course, being British is that, you know, as much as if you discover somewhere, you kind of don't want to tell anybody else because you want it to remain relatively secret. Yeah,
no, that's absolutely right. But you know, you can always tease out places.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you. Having said that, you know, have you got a sort of a secret place that you particularly like that you could share with us?
If I told you that, Mike, I would have to kill you. But there is a place, I'll tell you, a really nice place. So it's in Istanbul.
Okay.
And there is it's called Palatium Restaurant.
Okay.
I'm not saying you go there for the food. You go in, and in the background, in the sort of, we would call it a beer garden, they would call it that, but in the garden at the back, there's some stairs going down, and if you ask them, they'll say, oh yeah, you can go down there, and you go down there, and they're the ruins of the Roman Emperor's Palace, the Eastern Roman Emperor's Palace. They're completely unsupervised. You can roam around in the tunnels with a torch on your phone. There's no kind of, you know, bureaucratic regulations or whatever. It's like being Indiana Jones.
Wow.
And it's just right there in the garden of this restaurant. It's fantastic.
And that could be amazing, probably much better than an experience you might have in the Egyptian sort of pyramids, right? Which probably are now overrun with people.
Overrun, massive tourist traps. So those kinds of little things, those little sort of hidden gems, I think they're the things that make holiday, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, there's also, you know, there's something to be said for just exploring somewhere completely different. I mean, I know loads of people who have started going to different parts of the former Soviet Union, you know, which are now independent states on their own, which are fascinating, where loads of people have never been, you know.
Yeah, I remember going to Bulgaria in the 1990s. Nobody went to Bulgaria then. And actually, Bulgaria has some gorgeous beaches. And it was very cheap, and it was great fun. And it was, because it was off the beaten track, you know, you just felt there was a slight feeling of sort of, I don't want to say smug satisfaction, but there's a feeling of achievement having gone somewhere where nobody else has gone.
Yes,
you know?
Definitely. Thank you very much indeed. Dominic Sandbrook, historian, host of the Rest is History podcast, talking about basically going to places and discovering new places, which has got to be a great thing to do, right?